Blessings to you. So we're going to go ahead and get started now that we have all of our distinguished guests here. Thank you, people, for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. Put your phone, everybody, put your phone on mute. This is Dr. Elisha Robinson, your Integrative Healing Specialist, and we are coming to you from multiple areas all over the world. We're coming to you from Ghana. We're coming to you from Panama, from Wisconsin, from New York, from Illinois, and also from Indiana. And if you guys are out there, please feel free to give a shout out where you're from in the chat. And the chat is open for you guys to ask questions, okay? Because this is going to be a night of enlightenment, and hopefully we can get some answers to how we can help the Black community. The title of this webinar is King's Disease. And I was approached by a good friend of mine, a good colleague of mine, and he said, have you listened to the Nas CD? And I said, you know what? I have not. I'm not that much of a Nas fan, but we have a couple of Nas fans on here. And we did begin to discuss King's disease and what exactly King's disease is. But before we go into our topic, I want to introduce you guys to our distinguished panel. I told you a little bit about myself, so we're going to go ahead and have each one of these beautiful people tell you a little bit about themselves, and stick around because at the end, they're also going to tell you how you can connect to them, because they are available for their services, and you don't want to miss it. So please stick around to the end. So we're going to start off with KaRaa. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from.
I'm from New York City. I am a holistic licensed clinical social worker. I worked in the public school system there for almost 30 years. I did a lot of advocating as well as educating and empowering the parents, the children, and the families, teaching them holistic alternatives in terms of their diet, in terms of using your breath, in terms of using all types of holistic, natural type of things, and to also educate them on what their rights are and also what things they should be aware of in regards to vaccinations and all, other types of challenges that one goes through, as well as the way we get labeled at times inaccurately. So that's just a little bit about what I do. I also do presentations and experiential workshops to teach people hands-on how to make healthy foods, how to use sound therapy, how to use hypnotherapy, crystals, aromatherapy, and all types of things. So that's a little bit of what I do.
Thank you. Crystal, you're from Wisconsin, right?
I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Go Packers. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm currently a clinical assistant professor at UW-Milwaukee in the social work department. I've been in social work for over 20 years, and I've been in educating for over 10. I've been at UWM for about 4 years now. I've been a clinician for about over 10 years. So don't let the youth fool you. Youthful look fool you. I've been in the field for a while, and I also have, it's called Dane's Clinical Solutions, a LLC where I provide trainings, presentations, clinical assessments, things of that nature. So that's who I am.
Awesome. Marc from Chicago. Hey. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Marc.
Yeah, my name is Marc Haygood, aka the Herb Doc, and I am a licensed nutritionist, certified nutritionist. But I'm in the field of plants. I have a love for plants, and I've developed a relationship with plants over the last 30 years, with my specialty being wild edibles, plant ID, and of course, detoxification, which is one of my first loves. Everything around plants, as well as I've done speaking, and of course, the yada, 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 done a lot of things. I've written books with Dr. Robinson. I've worked with Dr. Robinson, done a lot of things over the years, but I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do, and I'm passionate about helping our people. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I appreciate you inviting me on, Dr. Robinson.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Dr. Gray, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
All right, beautiful. Thank you for having me, Elisha. I am Dr. Akua Gray with A Life of Peace Wellness Institute, and I am a traditional naturopath and wellness educator in the community over the last 2 decades. We've been educating wellness providers really all over the world. I have written maybe about 14 books on naturopathy, wellness, and nutrition. And yes, I'm coming to you from Ghana, West Africa, where I repatriated to about 10 years ago, and I absolutely love it. I am a wife of 32 years. Well, no, my husband corrected me the other day. It's 35 now. And mother of 3 and grandmother of 2. So just living, loving, and enjoying life.
Awesome. And Dr. Latham, last but not least, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am. I'm a soul with many people in me. So the name you see up on the screen is my straw name, based on the straw country I was born in, where I'm at right now, Panama, and I'm on my way from the Cayman Islands, where I've been residing for the past year and a half or so, doing some work with a resort there. And I'm actually on my way to Suriname, to the jungles of Suriname, to connect with our brothers and sisters there, to set up a holistic center in the jungle based on food security. And one of the persons in me lived in the US, left there 20 years ago, and that's who you know as Aris Latham or Latham. And so that's where, my foundation is, which is based on the SunFire cuisine. So having been born here in Panama in a place called Gatun, descendant of the canal builders, I keep a tight look on this place here because I'm always looking to collect my inheritance, So I have my legal base here, but my journey is global. I live around the world, and the SunFire cuisine is it's a concept that I developed in Harlem in 1979. And for the past 50 years, I'm not eating any animals. And for 44 years, I consume strictly 100% SunFire or living foods. So, and I'm now 73, by the way.
Wow, that's awesome.
Okay.
So I'm so excited. We have more attendees coming in. You guys come on in. Shout out to Deborah Smith and also Miss Fernandez. She's one of my patients, you guys. And thank you for being on and supporting us. So let's get into it. So if we know anything about King's disease, I'm going to kind of give you a quick history. King disease is purportedly got its name back during the time of Henry VIII, who developed gout. And it's a disease that's associated with richness and lavish lifestyle. And that's because gout was associated with people who live that rich and lavish lifestyle. But we know that you don't have to have a rich or lavish lifestyle in order to get gout. But because a lot of kings were getting it, that's what it was associated with. And that's why it's called King's disease. And so we know Nas, who has been around 20 plus years, a prolific writer, his last album, studio album, is entitled King's Disease. And he has several tracks. And track number 9, actually, he says that King's disease is also known as rich man's disease. You ain't gotta be rich to get it. Just doing too much, you get it. Gout, uric acid levels up high. Get you some lemongrass, cherries, alkaline water, and tell a friend. There's another track that that I really, really like. It's called The Cure. And basically he talks about the cure to the king's disease, which is being yourself and staying in your lane, staying true to yourself. So Nas uses this as a metaphor for how in life one must focus on the right things and avoid indulging in negative behavior. It's very important for us as clinicians because we are all been in our field for quite a bit of time. We've seen the things. We work specifically with quite a few people of different races and ethnic backgrounds, but most importantly, we know we each focus our area of expertise in the Black community. So I have some questions that I really want to ask you guys that can be quite challenging for the Black community. And I'm hoping that we can have some strong takeaway points for our community and walk home with some lessons learned and some actionable plans. And the first question that I have for our panel is in reference to what Nas was saying about the metaphor he used with his album for King's Disease. What are some negative behaviors that are overwhelming our community? Just feel free to jump in. Anybody, let's just jump in. Let's just have a roundtable conversation. So please feel free. And guess what? I'm a drama queen. So I'm looking for some drama. So I want you guys to get into some fights and don't be afraid. Don't be politically correct. So I want you guys to be real because it's time for us to be real. So let's start off with Marc. Marc, what are some negative behaviors that you notice with the people you work with in your community in Chicago, in the Chicagoland, Indiana area that is overwhelming our community?
Well, you know, the obvious one is in Chicago, we live in a food desert. So food is primarily the number one item. And, you know, in our community, especially in the hood, having access to fresh fruits and vegetables has been a challenge. A lot of the supermarkets and things have gone away. And even the supermarkets that they do have, such as like the Pete's Produces and things like that, that's a produce place, but basically they have pork and pig feet and stuff. Actually, that's the thing that they market as on sale. So you go to a produce market and there's barely any produce and it smells like fish and all kind of other things. So having, you know, if you're in the hood and you want to try to be healthier, having access and, you know, having access where you can just go get fresh fruits and vegetables has been a challenge. You know, going to a lot of the major supermarkets, the Jewels and things like that, most of them have GMO and don't really even have real food. You know, you go inside the supermarkets and doesn't even, you go to the produce aisle and it smells like roach spray. It doesn't even smell like food anymore. So obviously we know that food is our number one, but in my opinion, it's our number one vice in our neighborhood, other than the obvious drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, those kind of things. But food to me is our number one thing that we have to take care of in our community. Get fresh fruit, fresh vegetables. You know, some of the farmers connecting more with the farmers and things like that.
What do you think about that, Dr. Latham?
Well, it's chronic dependence. You know, we're drugged up, you know, and we're so dependent on things being done for us. We don't do it for self. We don't really step up appropriately. Mm-hmm. This is why when I landed in Harlem in 1978 and saw that, you know, basically coming out of Tanzania in the Kilimanjaro at the time and being a fruitarian and eating 100% organic fruits, that there was none in Harlem. So I stepped up and went and set up a co-op and brought organic fruits into Harlem in 1978. You know, so I can take care of myself and in turn take care of my community and open up a place called Savannah Herbs, or herb shop, because I know our people were always looking for healing and herbs are the first go-to, you know. And so I infused it with organic fruits and presented my SunFire cuisine with it. And it was easily acceptable by the community because they come in for their herbs and found out that eating these organic fruits might even be more beneficial to the community. So for me, you know, I think we really need to step higher, you know, and defend ourselves, protect ourselves. And this is why when I got into this culture of dealing with plant foods exclusively in the 60s, it was part of the revolution. You know, it was part of Black power, self-empowerment, and defending ourselves, protecting our lives. Forget about the bald eagle and trying to deal with veganism and defending and protecting animals. It was about defending this blackhead that we live in. You know, because food is a weapon. It's been a weapon since then, and it still is. You know, and to even buy into certain cultures that we have accepted universally, you know, it's really been very damaging to us. And the most damaging one is this culture of being sick. There's no need to be sick, period. So forget about healing and all of this stuff. If you step up and eat the way the body was designed to eat, you will never, ever get sick. So that is not a natural part of living. So let's get rid of all of these false concepts that we've been living under, but step up, take back the power, and defend our lives on all levels, especially from the food market level.
One of the questions that I think I'm gonna throw some controversy in there. One of the questions that one of the attendings asked was, when are we going to evolve as a Black people? And one of the things that I see coming up for me was we're always keep thinking about, well, this is what was done to us by the white man and slavery. We keep bringing that into the narrative, which I think is a negative behavior. So what do you think about that, KaRaa? I see you're shaking your head yes, emphatically. What do you think about that? Do you think that we are constantly holding on to our past?
No, the problem is we are miseducated about our past. We are disempowered about our past. In the school system, I always call it history, his story, their story about what happened versus the truth, which we go through a lot even now, listening to different political things. Our children are not taught the power of their true heritage. Mm-hmm. They're taught that their life started by being slaves, and so that's their identity, versus the fact that we were actually prisoners of wars, that not only were we brought here, we were not unwilling immigrants. We were brought here as prisoners of wars. We were stripped of our culture, stripped of our language, stripped of a sense of being human beings, mm-hmm. and then told, well, when are you going to get over it? We're still constantly bombarded. We are taught our oppressors' languages. Our original history was not European. We were never taught African languages because they know if we were taught our languages, we would then be reconnected with our true culture and be more empowered about who we are. When I worked with special ed kids in the city, when I would go traveling to different parts of Africa to show and bring pictures back so they knew exactly what it looked like and shared about our true story, even the most acting out child would sit down and say, you mean I've come from something of richness? Well, then I can't be acting a fool like this. Wow. And from that, it would inspire them to have more pride in their hair, instead of trying to be other people's hair, to have pride in their own complexion, their own. And people would mistake that for, well, if you're for yourself, you're against others. It's like, no, everybody else is proud of who they are. Our children need to be empowered. Our families need to be empowered, that they are not less than. So when they say, oh, you should get over slavery, it's like, we should get over the misrepresentation of it. Mm-hmm. We should no longer identify as that's where we came from and who we are. That was our Holocaust. Mm-hmm. That was when we were, when they talk about everybody else has thrived in this country, nobody else but us was stripped of our identity and our sense of self. There was a lot of atrocities that came, but we were the only ones that did that. So in terms of mind control, even in terms of the media, when you mentioned Nas was attacked a lot because back in the day, he had songs like, I know I can and what have you, to have a sense of self-esteem. They don't want that. They want the music to be the itches and everything else so that our children have a sense of negativity about themselves and each other. And one of the things I invite our communities to do is to promote positive self-identity, positive food, as the brothers were saying, because you are what you eat. And a lot of that is presentation. When I would teach children, oh, well, this designer water instead of blue juice, Maybe you won't need the Ritalin because you're not poisoning your system. And to make it fun instead of a punishment, as they said, they would embrace that, teach them how to make things and make it fun. So as we give our children, our families, and everybody in the community the tools they need, and to re-educate, because, you have the Mac attacks on TV. You have the quick this, you have, oh, this is going to make you sexy. Oh, this is going to make you, all these lies. We have to take back the minds of our communities.
Awesome. And Dr. Carter, there's a question about mental health and depression. What are some of the negative behaviors that you've seen in your field and line of work that you think is bringing down our community as a whole?
Well, one of the things I see is a lot of masking and not being honest about how you're really feeling, because we come from a strong culture, but we also think that if we show any type of need for help, that is considered weak. And so we don't talk about, how we feel. We don't talk about our family history. And so this is generations of feeling like I am supposed to be able to endure whatever happens, whenever it happens, without getting any help, or I shouldn't need help. And that is definitely wrong, and definitely not how to help with your mental health. And so we have to educate, that's something that we keep talking about. We have to educate people in the community that, for one, it's okay to be not okay, especially now with everyone going through COVID and the trauma of, watching Black and brown bodies get murdered on, social media or on television. A lot of us are dealing with a lot. And I think that once we stop masking and pretending like we're okay when we're not, we can then start getting access and receive help. So I think that's really important. And I wanted to say, it just kind of piggyback too on the food. As a therapist, I know that was something that was really challenging as far as trying to educate or re-educate people in the community about healthy eating and how that affects our mental health, and how, eating junk, not exercising, all those things, how that affects your mental health. And so I think that that's something that's an ongoing thing too, is to continue to try to educate our community on things that they've just been generationally doing for many years. So.
Thank you so much, Crystal. That was awesome. Dr. Gray, one of the things that I learned from one of the tracks in Nas's album was from King's Disease was, it's important for us to learn to share information that helps us to help ourselves. And so that's why I'm hearing here, it's like we're isolated. What Dr. Latham was doing was phenomenal. It was different, but he shared the information. He didn't keep it just within his four walls of his home. He went out in the community and shared it abroad. In this new pandemic era, where everyone has to learn to isolate themselves. Now, 6 feet apart, can't be close to you, which is counterintuitive to the Black community, where we are all together, we stick together, and we're one community, we're a village. How are we able to share information during this era if we have, right now, we're afraid to even be in the same quarters with each other?
Well, education is, of course, the key. And reaching out in the different circles, like what we're doing today, us coming from so many different backgrounds and as healers, we've touched so many different people and we have those followers. I think that those of us who have the reach in the community definitely need to be talking more about health. We also have to deal with the major, that first question that you asked, what is the thing that is causing us to be in a detrimental state right now? And my answer to that is ignorance. Mm-hmm. We are still ignorant about healthy living on all levels. We're still ignorant about mental health. We're still ignorant about emotional health. We're still ignorant about spiritual health. And our community is definitely still ignorant about our physical health and taking care of ourselves. So that education piece, and those of us who have the opportunity to reach as many people as we can, we have to be talking right now because, you know, not everybody has a computer that they can get on. So, you know, those of us who can reach people through alternative channels, like speaking to people at the community centers that we might happen to work at, those aspects of reaching each other to help remove that veil of ignorance that we have is so very important.
Do you think the Black Lives Matter? Please, everyone, feel free to jump in. If you want to comment on what Dr. Gray has said, please feel free. But do you think, I think that what we're doing on a small scale is important, but with this ignorance being so ingrained in us, like someone said, we were literally pulled from our culture. We were not willing participants in being brought to this foreign land. We were stripped of our names. We were stripped of our languages. We were stripped of our culture and thrown into something new, something different. So I think change needs to happen on a large scale and across all platforms. We have mental health platforms. We have the educational platform. We have the naturopathic. Several of us on here are physical, naturopathic, and spiritualists and healers. Black Lives Matter movement is on a national scale. Do you think that this movement has helped to thrust us forward in identifying problems in our community that we need to build on? Does it help? Are you guys in agreement with it, or are you against it? Feel free to just answer and jump in.
Well, fortunately, right now, today, the actual Black Lives Matter movement it's a global movement, you know, and I think many of us, we need to really, you know, come out from behind the screen of this nationalism, you know, whether we live in the US or Jamaica or wherever we are, it's global. A lot of what we're experiencing, we're doing it all over the world. So we need to really join forces globally. And also we need to take notes from what other brothers and sisters are doing in other communities around the world. And that movement out of the US, the Black Lives Movement, it has definitely woken up many Black people around the entire world that have signed up, that have joined up, and seeing that we're having the same issues constantly, and we need to break this stuff immediately. So, but still, I must give thanks to what's been going on, especially through this Black Lives Movement and through other movements that have been taking place throughout the years. You know, our situation is not as dire as we're in this bucket thinking that, you know, we're really off of it. And especially if we look at it on a global level, to see, like, for example, where I'm heading to Suriname, you know, Suriname, we have Africans in the jungle of Suriname that has been living there for 300 years since slavery. You know, these are Maroons, the largest African Maroon community in the world, you know, and we've been independent in there despite, you know, the Dutch government. And it's the same kind of stuff that I see in pockets in the US and other places. So we really need to take notes. We need to compare notes. You know, what our brothers and sisters did in Suriname at the end of slavery as well, they bought all the plantations that they worked on. And now today, they still own these properties. And the Maroons own these lands in the jungle, along with the indigenous people there. And this is why they're linking up with people like myself, like, come on home, brother. You know, we need to bring, you know, this modern movement of live food, you know, vegetarianism, you know, and fuse it with our indigenous culture, indigenous healings, you know, just like what Dr. Sebi did for many of us, not just in the US, but globally. You know, he has made it a big imprint, and it's gone beyond even our race, our culture. So we really need to connect the dots a little tighter You know, there have been great models in our community in the US. You know, what happened in the 60s and 70s through the independent Black schools. This was my grounds. This is where I learned. You know, it wasn't about learning this in school. I went through formal education, and what I learned is nothing that I'm dealing with today. What I'm dealing with today is what I learned at Uhuru Sasa Shule, you know, in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, on Claver Place, you know, and you still see the remnants of it today, the African Street Festival and these types of things. We had a brilliant educator that was working with the school system in New York, Jitu Weusi. He stepped out of that box, you know, and set up, you know, the East, you know, Uhuru Sasa, an independent. So we need to really join forces with those of us within our community who have the privilege, who have the know-how, who have what it takes, even the wealth, you know, to make this thing happen. And that's part of what I'm doing here in Panama as well. You know, there's a very wonderful brother here who has stepped up, you know, and basically throwing a Mickey in the game. You know, because we've been begging these governments here, especially in Latin America, where, you know, we pretty much are the dominant population in Central and South America, and of course the Caribbean, but we've been begging these governments, oh, give us this, give us that. And now here's a brother that has stepped up, that has used, you know, his inheritance from his father, who was actually associated with Martin Luther King in the US. He has come back here and he's stepping up and putting up his money, his wisdom, his know-how to empower the African community here to take up our share of the pie. You know, so these are the kind of things we got to link up. We got to hook it up and really not just look in the small hole where we're stuck in today.
Right. And that's why I think the Black Lives Matter movement is important. It's one aspect of what we need, which is, of course, globalism, but it's also financial stability and growth in numbers. We need to come together. And that leads me to my next question. So why is it pivotal for us to choose a president elect wisely? Why is it very important at this time that we choose the correct president? And who's correct president? Throwing it out there. Come on now, Sister Nefa KaRaa, I see you raise your eyebrows. What are your thoughts about that? And let's keep our responses to about a minute or so, and we're gonna get everybody in, because I really want us to discuss this thoroughly.
Well, in terms of both that you were saying, and the questions they asked about how do we overcome ignorance, regardless of who or what have you, part of it is that we are a large voting potential. Mm-hmm. And we don't tend to claim that power. And however we vote, whoever ends up in position, that we have to we have to pull together. Like, we have to use the Black Lives Matter and veggie back off of that to hold whoever accountable. We need to come up with an agenda of what we need as a people, what we need in our communities here and all over the world, and collectively come up with a strategy and what we need, and hold whoever is in power, not just the presidency, but our local politicians, the Senate, the state, because when we just complain amongst ourselves, but we don't collectively command and demand, this is what we want. I remember there's been a lot in the media lately about Ice Cube and how he has a Black plan that certain occupants want to graft into their platinum plan. The whole thing is that we need to all know and co-create with each other what a Black plan is, and collectively, and with all the states, all the countries, this is what we demand, not ask for, not beg for. So part of it is collectively, because right now we're voting between two old white men. We need to have showing more representation. Even when we had a Black president, we sat back and said, well, we good now, he Black. He had said when he got elected, I am only as powerful as what you hold me accountable for. And everybody was great. Well, he ain't doing this. He ain't doing. Well, where were we to hold him accountable?
Right.
Where were we to get outraged when they disrespected the only Black president we've ever had in this country that they acknowledge, who was more qualified than anybody else? So part of it is us veggie backing off this platform of Black Lives Matter. Because when they say, well, all lives matter, yeah, but everybody else is treated as humans. We're not. So it's like,
how long do you think that's going to last, though? How long do you think the Black Lives is going to last? Do you think it's going to last long?
It depends on us. It depends on us. If we're using it as spectators and watching to see how is Black Lives Matter like it's a separate entity versus how does each and every one of us has a talent, has a skill, has some type of role we can play. So if we're sitting back as we've always done and historically look to see what everybody else is doing versus looking at what can I do to help perpetuate that? What can I do to help empower it even more, to grow it forward? And how can we connect with all of our brothers and sisters, as the brother just said, globally, not just in our little part of the world? So how successful it is how much are we willing to contribute and put into that to perpetuate it. Part of it is that when they talk about Black Lives Matter, this is like something we've never had before.
Right.
I go back to, we don't know our true history.
Right.
The next generations weren't taught all of the civil rights. I grew up doing civil rights, and there was things I didn't know since I was a child that until I researched it as an adult, I didn't know. So it goes back to, again, if we don't know our true story, so we're not reinventing the wheel. So we're not knowing that, we're never taught about Black Wall Street and all the other self-sufficient and the devastations of how they were destroyed because we don't even know we had those abilities.
Right.
So we have to do a lot in educating, which, as I said, that's why they disempower the independent schools. When we impoverish a community so they can't afford to support our independent schools, so that they're no longer there, and they don't want them there because they are teaching our true stories. That's when you have a lot of this self-medicating, the decline in mental health, because if you hate yourself, it's kind of hard for you to see yourself thriving. So it's no one thing, it's a collective of all these different things, which is why it's beautiful to have such a mosaic here, because it takes all aspects. If you're not eating right, you're not going to think right. If you don't know who you are and be proud of it, you're going to have mental issues. If you're not doing a holistic approach during naturopathy and what have you, and taking all their poisons, so it's not a silver bullet. It's not one solution. It's a system.
Yes, a system. So who else? What do you think about the racial climate surrounding the selection? What do you think, Crystal? How has this negatively impacted the Black community? I had a question from a attendee. She says the stress of racism, which it has been pushed by both camps. Racism. This person is more racist than that person. This person is more sexist than that person. And he did this and he did this when he was younger and this. How does the stress of racism and sexism impact us, especially during this presidential campaign, where that seemed like those two were the biggest issues on both parties' platforms, and I feel like it was kind of like a way for them to look at the real issues, which is growth of our community, financially stabilizing our community, especially during this pandemic. I think a lot that has been really looked over. So what do you think about what's going on, especially to address what she said? She says, how can we fight this to preserve our physical and mental health? Because this has mentally taken a toll on me, as well as people that I know that are close to me in our community.
Wow, that's a loaded question, because I think it's a lot of trauma that continues to happen. And I think this election is definitely causing a lot of anxiety, because many, and I'm going to try to answer both questions. Your first question about the election, the fact that this election, people see this as, you're voting against, two of less evil, right? We don't have but two parties. And so we have to vote. That's my opinion, is that voting is essential. And that voting is important, not just for the presidency, but for your local and state government, because that's who affects the things that we're talking about, the resources that we're talking about, where you live, in the cities that you live in, who's your mayor, who's your governor, all of that affects whether you get services, what your health care looks like, what your mental health care looks like. So we definitely need to vote, and we need to make sure that we are educated on people's platform. And I think that's the other piece to the presidential is, what is the platform? We talk about the different, the platinum plan. And then I think Biden has the Lift Every Voice plan. Like, have we read that? Have we looked to see what's in that? And whether they're going to actually do it or not, I agree. The focus is too much on criminal justice and not enough on the things that we're talking about today. And so, again, I think the most important thing is that we do go out and vote, and that to deal with some of the stress of what that looks like is, for example, I know I just stopped watching a lot of the media coverage of this, because, watching television can be traumatic in this day and time. And we know that, the more we keep hearing the stress of possibly the person that's in office now being back in office, for a lot of people of color, that causes a lot of stress. And so, a part of this is turning off some of those vices that keeps your stress level really high. People are on social media arguing with back and forth about the political issues. Like, get away from that, and find your peace within yourself, as well as, like I said, this is just very traumatic, and that we need to also come together as, a community about the things that we need, and go to our local politicians and deal with that. Because again, I sometimes think we focus so much on who's the president, but not enough on who's really affecting our day-to-day lives.
Awesome. Anyone else want to chime in? No?
Well, I
So what,
agree with Crystal. Wait, real quick, just real quick. I think that sometimes focusing on the president more so than focusing on our individual communities. So the aldermen, the local people, to get access to resources, like we talked about earlier. Healthcare, I call it not really healthcare, sick care, but we don't really have access to real healthcare. We don't have real access to real food. And then also self-care. I think a lot of us we're so focused on the daily grind. We're so focused on things that we forget to neglect ourselves. So in a situation where we're in a pandemic, we have lost focus on self-care, because community starts with you, right? We can't help the community without helping yourself first.
right.
So we're so stressed out and worried about who's going to be president, where your local congressman, your local official, like in our community in Chicago, we, like I said, we live in a food desert. We don't have access to fresh food, fruits and vegetables. Young kids don't even know what fruits and vegetables are anymore, and so we definitely have to focus on our community and focus on the youth. And it's amazing how much the youth pick up when they're put in the right situation. You go to public schools. The reason why kids are not learning is because the information they're given it's not interesting to them. Give a young kid some interesting information and get them involved, they'll thrive. So I think the focus on who's president and those kind of things, although it's important, I think is secondary to working on our local things and working in our community.
Dr. Gray has a very, very important take on things. When I had a conversation with her a few weeks ago, back in, was it early September, end of August, we talked about holistic sexuality. and how that impacts the Black community. And in reading your book, thank you very much. If you guys want to, I saw a couple of y'all ears peek up. Holistic sexuality. What is it? How is it important? Everybody do it, because that's why we all here. We procreate. We creators. How can we utilize this? How do we? I want you to talk a little bit about that. How do we utilize that in a manner to help heal our community? Because that's something very, very important. Because of course, when I think about when I was younger and I would watch movies. And believe me, I'm old enough to know these movies where they would make fun of African American people. We were labeled, we had certain labels. We were labeled as either the watermelon eating Sambo, or the pickaninny, or we were hypersexual, we were over sexualized, especially women. And so sex was looked at and demoralized in our community as a demoralizing way for our community. How do we use that to heal ourselves? So you could tell us a little bit about what holistic sexuality is, and how do we get rid of those perpetual racist views that have been entrenched in our community in order to allow us to heal ourselves?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, holistic sexuality is based on being able to bring in the four aspects of ourselves to heal our lives. So we focus on the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and the emotional aspects of ourselves, and take all of those components into the most powerful energy that we have available to us, and that is our sexual energy. And so when we talk about how to use holistic sexuality, that goes back to what Marc said in thinking about self-care first. Now, when we think about self-care, a lot of people take a long time to work on themselves. And so if a person can have a foundation of actually working on themselves and bringing into balance their mental, emotional, their mind, body, and soul, then when they step out into the world and they interact and they interrelate with other people, then what they have worked on with themselves in terms of bringing balance to themselves will shine through. And so when that shining through begins to affect multiple people, then you'll see a chain reaction in how people interrelate to each other, which again could bring about more progress in the community. And so, of course, when we learn how to treat each other, because, you know, listening to Dr. Aris, we've been dealing with what we're dealing with on so many levels for a very long time.
Yes.
And I think that part of the demise of our powerful Black organizations that came out in the 60s and the 70s had to do with personal relationships.
Yes.
Many of them fell apart because people couldn't control their sexual behavior. And we were not emotionally mature enough, again, from the slavery experience, to actually affect each other on a more positive level so that our organizations could have thrived and survived. Because most of those organizations that really helped us to move forward during the civil rights time, they fell apart. And I would say because of people not being able to control, or people not being in alignment or having balanced emotional, sexual, personal relationships. It was a lot of mess going on in our organizations. And unfortunately, that was a part of the reason why things fell apart. You know, people, especially sisters, they were hurt because of the emotional immaturity, the sexual immaturity that was put forth in those organizations. So, you know, not to be the naysayer in how we relate to each other. But again, that self-care and being able to learn how to relate to each other can get us a lot further, because you can build, but your sexual behavior, your personal relationships can tear everything that you built down in a second. And so holistic sexuality is very important in terms of us acting and being mature beings or mature people to be able to affect progress in our communities on a long-term basis, which is one thing that we have been lacking.
So how do we, from each one of you guys' point of view, how do we build on that? We talked about the mental, we talked about the emotional, spiritual. I really like how Sister Nefa KaRaa, she has a take on children. She helps children heal, and she has her expertise there. And I think we all have our area of expertise where we can actually come together with an actionable plan. The panelists, or the attendees here, they have questions, and their questions they're asking is, what are we going to do next, y'all? We've been saying the same story over and over for years and years and years. We need to heal. We need to move on. We need to progress. We need to strengthen ourselves. We need to build financial stability and financial numbers together. How can us six come together right now and do that in order to leave with an actionable plan that we can implement?
Well, and listening to folks, and Veggie backing off what we were saying about sexuality, as I said before, it's not as basic as being mature. It's healing the traumas that we've had that have been handed down from generation to generation.
Yes.
There's this condition, it's called epigenetics, which talks about how trauma is actually passed down from several generations down. So that even if it's not the children's generation, they'll be acting it out. That's why I don't just work with children, but all the different aspects of family, because they play off of each other. A lot of times I would actually work with the parents, because the children are actually the symptoms of, the parents are actually the symptoms of the generations before. And that's why I said it's important to know our story based on what actually happened. Because if you're not aware of the traumas, a lot of the sexual misconducts and stuff is the fact that we were violated sexually during enslavement. And it was never addressed, it was never healed. And then we blame the victims, we villainize the victims, they go to jail and what have you, instead of for treatment. So if we're not healing each other, and as you said, there's holistic ways of doing it. There's also clinical techniques. As I said, in epigenetics, they have different techniques where you work with the body, where you work with family constellations, where we work with sound and music. Diet is an important part, because if you're eating fake food all the time, you're not going to be able to think straight to heal through anything.
Right.
I say is a systemic, where everybody that's here at the table and then some, but you have to address all the different components. As I said, the physicality around food, exercise, meditation, breathing, what have you, sense of self, in terms of knowing your story so that you can, through the different clinical techniques, be able to heal it through experiential education. They teach to our children's weaknesses. They know that our children are experiential learners, so they purposely teach them linearly, knowing that that's their weakness. It's like teaching a child in Russian when they speak English and wonder what's wrong with them and then say they're special ed, versus no, you're purposely misrepresenting the information so that they don't grasp it. I ask people all the time, is it that you can't learn? Or is it if you were in a classroom where they spoke Russian and you didn't speak that, is it that you can't learn, or that they're not talking your language? I use music. Our children naturally will go to a djembe and other type of basic instruments and can play them, and it will ground them in a way that's more effective than any blue pill, red pill, white pill, or whatever they'll ever have. In educating them, they are on the TV, on the tablets, and now the phones and stuff. They are modeled after being violent. They are desensitized around violence. It is glorified to be violent sexually and everything else. If we're not supervising what our children watch, if we're not demanding and exposing them to more constructive and more positive type of messages, and then wonder, I used to have children that would cut themselves, and they call cutters. And every one of them, when I would speak to them, they talked about some show on the internet called The Gracie.
Mm-hmm.
None of the parents all heard of it, but they had no idea that this was being modeled on that show, and that children were giving the message, well, if I cut up my arm, it'll relieve stress and I'll feel better.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it, as parents, we've got to be more proactive in supervising what our children are watching and not using modern technology as a convenient babysitter. Most of us don't even know our own true history to be able to teach it to our children. We've been misinformed.
Right.
When it talks about each one teach one, collectively, we need to take back our story and learn the true thing. We need to, they use part of our poor diet was they used that to break us when we were here. We didn't eat pork back in the day. That was part of the breaking in thing. And as the brother said, it's not just Chicago, in New York. You go to our neighborhoods, they got the worst produce with the highest prices. You got all the fast foods. We don't have Whole Foods in our neighborhoods. We got liquor stores and fast foods. You got to go to other people's neighborhoods to get correct produce and holistics and say, well, because we don't eat those things, so they're not, we're not good marketeers for that. And even with that is presentation. If you tell the child, oh, that's good for you, no, they're not going to eat it. But I had a whole group of middle school boys one time fight over grapefruits because I told them that you had to be mature to eat grapefruits. All of a sudden, that became the end thing. It's all on presentation. And a lot of times it's learning the language, starting where they are.
Right.
And going from there forward. And then you do all these different resources in our community collectively, because no one person can do it.
It's important for us to understand that the children are our foundation, and we need to start with them if we're going to make a change. Because my daughter is 5 years old, and from a newborn, I've always taught her how to eat. And then I'll give her 3 choices, because she's at the age where she wants to choose her own thing. So I'm like, okay, you can choose your own thing, but the 3 choices are all healthy. And then she has to make a choice, and she walks away like, I chose that. And even now, she'll say to me, that's not healthy. She'll go up to people, see them eating something, literally. And she would do that to my patients in my office because she's the office secretary. So she comes everywhere with me, and she'll sit and say, that's not healthy. That's not healthy. And so if we teach them, they will learn. So that's very, very important. We are doing so many great things in our community. So we talked about the things that we need to address. What are we doing right? So let's talk about that. What are we doing right in our community? Brother Latham, tell me, what are we doing right in our community and we need to focus more on?
Well, that's a great angle, because we are doing quite a few things right in our community. And that's why we have seen that a lot of our communities are being targeted, as clients in certain areas. So number one, when it comes to the food, which is really one of our most crucial angles of anything that we do in life, is driven by our food in many ways. And food is centered around everything. Research has shown that in the US, the African-American community is the most loyal natural food community that patronize natural food establishments. And you get us, in the door, and you win us over, we're going to be constantly going to your establishment and supporting it, and we're going to put the word out. There was one company in LA that had a natural food market in about 5 different areas in Southern California. But the one in the Crenshaw district was the most successful in the Black community. We are loyal customers when it comes to, so it's a beautiful day today to see what's going on in our communities around food, especially around plant food. There are a few little sore spots, but overwhelmingly, we have upped the game. We have stepped it up. To see the young brothers and sisters today that are coming to my spaces on social media, and getting hooked up, wanting to get, the latest information and want to follow a lot in my footsteps. It really reminds me of when I was growing up and being accessible to people like Dick Gregory and Haki Madhubuti, out of Chicago, From Plant to Planet. That was the book that turned me on, but it was coming from a very revolutionary perspective. But to see that continuing today, but on a higher level, back then it was about, trail mix and, healthy snacks and stuff. But these young folks today, they're demanding raw food in many places, sun-fired food. They're eating more fruits. They're talking about juicing and detoxing and what's the best juicer, bro? How can I make this happen? So there's lots of great things that we're doing right, and the word is out. It's spreading. Look at the Rastafarian community. Been vegetarians for years, forever. Italists. And that's out. So many people, so many ones around the world, pulling out their ITIL credentials. People are looking for CMOS. The work that Dr. Sabi did. Oh, Dr. Laila, Africa. The work that brother's done. It's tremendous. It's having a major impact on all of us today. So we're doing a great few things right, especially when it comes to food. We're on top of our lives, and the word is out. It's spreading. A lot of our people are sick and tired of being sick.
Right.
Word, questions from people who have never heard about this stuff, and they're like, well, how can I do this? How can I do that? I remember even when I was in Harlem in the 80s, and I have a booth, say at the Harlem Day Festival, and I have my Sunburger up there, little kid would come by and, Mom, I want one of those because it looks exactly like what they saw on TV. And then they'll step away, come back, and it's like, oh, brother, what kind of meat was that? They just knew they were eating meat. So there's a way it's been going on. You go to Atlanta, you go to DC, you go to a lot of our communities, you'll see it today. There are many restaurants in our community that are featuring wholesome foods, and not just here in the US, but in Ghana, in Jamaica, even in South Africa, many places around the world. We have stepped it up very, very strongly. And that's why, people like myself, people like Dr. Gray, we're in big demand today for what we do. So yeah, we have some bright things going on, and it's catching on, and we're very loyal once we see it working, and many of us are stepping up very strongly. So I really give thanks for that.
Awesome.
And I'd like to also say that over the last few years, I have seen many younger and younger people also coming to our institute for wellness education. They are saying, I don't want to be sick like my mother was sick. I don't want to be, in an unhealthy relationship. So what is it that I can do? Very surprised. We have had children wanting to learn wellness education in terms of energy medicine from the age of 8 years old, saying to their parents, I want to learn how to do that too. And their parents saying, okay, let me check and see if they will teach the children. So, I think that one of the things that is important is being able to have those institutions. Over the last 2 decades, at A Life of Peace, we have been able to educate thousands of students in wellness education. And, I have to say that a lot of the wellness educators that you are seeing out there today that are putting up their institutes in their local communities have come through a life of peace. So we are extremely excited about it. You know, change does take time. And that is one thing that we do have time, because, you know, being the first people here in this world, we're also going to be the last people here in this world. So we've got time. And I think with the consistent efforts, and that is one thing that I also try to get people to understand too, is you have to be consistent. Sometimes it may get hard, and sometimes there may be low periods of time in what it is that you're doing, especially if your goals are honorable towards your community. But if you would just be consistent and go through those low periods, you know, maximize on those high times when you are really flowing in what it is that you have to offer, that's very, very important. So if we should remain consistent. Consistency. That comes out of my mouth in every single class that I teach, because oftentimes people will start something and then life happens and then fall off the bandwagon. But when life happens, that's also an indicator that you should probably be doing whatever you're doing a little bit more, growing more food, educating more people.
Yes.
Because, you know, that monkey wrench that gets thrown in is also an indication that you are doing something right.
Right.
And to be able to push right on through that. So consistency is also one of those things that is important. And I see it happening every day, you know, with the young people.
One of the things that I like, one of the other things I think the youth, with Dr. Sebi, if you look at most people who, you know, Dr. Sebi's been around for a long time, and with his passing now, most of the people promoting that's asking about CMOS and a lot of the things that the Dr. Sebi died are in their 20s. And so I think Dr. Sebi that his death has re-sparked a lot in our community. Also, with the pandemic, I think that Black people, we're very resilient, and when we're faced with challenges, a lot of times when we're faced with those tough situations, we rise. You know, we rise to the top. Because now, in this last year, even in the spring, a lot of people have been coming to me asking, a lot of the young people asking about farming and gardening. There has been a lot of, in Chicago, there's been a lot of local garden centers that's doing community gardens. Community gardens, which is called CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, has been thriving this year because of the pandemic. You know, people are very concerned now about their health because of what's going on. And I think that just piggybacking on this whole change in times, most of us in the media, a lot of us are focused on a lot of the negative things, but I think, Dr. Robinson, that was a great point. There's so many positive underground things that are not being spoken of, because it gives us a sense of hopelessness when we think,
Right.
listen, a pandemic, what are we doing? Everybody's dying, you know, the world's going to hell. What are we doing? But there's so many underground movements, and there's so many positive things, because even with Lolo Africa dying, and even with Dr. Dick Gregory, a lot of those deaths, people have now started getting his African Holistic Health by Dr. Lolo Africa. That book is through the roof now. People are
Right.
reading the book. People are asking questions. I'm getting a lot of people asking me questions about Dr. Sebi in the last 3 or 4 or 5 months. You know, a couple of years ago, nobody even knew who Dr. Sebi was, and now he's a folk hero, which is great for our community, because now he's promoting a lot of the, you know, the basic concepts of water, you know, food, fresh vegetables, and herbs.
Well, and I would just like to say, when we talk about what things are positive as far as mental health is concerned, I think in the churches, we're starting to talk about mental health more, which is something that was not happening in the past. I also see more young people, once again, who have no problem saying they need to see a therapist or they need to talk to someone, particularly teenagers. When I I was meeting with clients. I mean, they would ask their parents, could they come to see me? And I'm seeing an increase of African-American women who are now starting to attend counseling. So I think that, you know, the more we talk about mental health, I think I do see changes in that. And I do think that some of the celebrities, even though sometimes, you know, that's how we get motivated, unfortunately, but the fact that there are celebrities like Taraji Henson and Charlemagne the God who are kind of steady pumping mental health into their platforms, I think is really making a big difference. So I do see a change and a slight change with us trying to make sure that we concentrate on our mental health as well.
Awesome. I think it's important to go back on what Dr. Latham was saying about everything he mentioned. Remember, fads and trends are started by whom? African American people. When we look at music, when we look at who are they putting out when they want to sell something, they come to us to sell it. So it's very, very important that we understand our power, seriously, because we know for a fact that it's our community that starts trends and everybody follows us. We're natural born leaders. And when I first started my holistic medicine practice, most of my clients and patients were Caucasian. And I had a few patients who we did really, really good with. They lost weight. They got off all of their medications and they were consistent, just like you said, being consistent, and they kept with it. Literally, all of their family members came to me after that, from their grandkids. Even though I'm not a pediatrician, they brought their children up all the way up to grandma and auntie. I kid you not. And that's because we are we're the consumers. We bring in each other. I'm doing well. So what do? We help each other to bring each other. And that goes back to one of the things that Nas was saying about how we can help cure ourselves of these King's disease is through helping one another and sharing information. That's very, very, very important and empowering. And I think utilizing platforms such as the BET platform, which everyone watches. We're not the only ones that watch BET. Other people of other races watch us and to look to see what's best, what's next, what are they doing so we can do it too. So what else are we doing good in our communities? I like this conversation because we tend to harp on the negative. What are we doing good so that way we can reinforce that, support that, and repeat it?
Well, as you said, even with the Black Lives Matter movement, the fact that they have been an impetus to take action, to give voice to, that it gives a base for people to springboard from. So that in itself, the fact that it became global, that it didn't even become, certain communities, it created a momentum all over the world. Right. That in itself is a very positive and powerful message that, yes, we're tired and we're not going to just lay down and take it anymore. Right. And that they are speaking up, that we have more young people. The fact that it's being perpetuated by young people is a great sign. It's not just as old heads out there, trying to rekindle something, that it is being perpetuated by our young people. And as everyone has said, that we're having more and more of the younger generations beginning to, want to know more about their true self and their true history, about wanting to eat better, about being more conscious and aware on all of these different fronts. We went through a period where there was not just a food desert, but a mind desert and everything. We were just taking 2 pills and call it a day. Mm-hmm. And it's becoming more and more conscientiousness around wanting to do better. And as I said, I think it's each one teach one. And it continues to go, mellow out. I think in using Black Lives Matter as a teaching tool, as an experiential tool around all the different type of resources and supports that are around, to try to bring back, contacting local community centers, because they're now looking for more holistic resources. As the brother said, when we have the African street festivals, we have a whole segment on holistic well-being from soup to nuts, and that we're having more and more people, gravitating there and wanting to learn. The fact that we have books from Dr. Akua, from Dr. Africa, from Dr. CB, and even with the internet, everything has its positives and negatives, that now people can research and find and Google, where are the holistic centers? Where are all the holistic stores? And also, how can I make my own nut milk? How can I make my own vegetarian? It's become easier than ever. So showing children, instead of using the media, or anybody using the media, instead of using it for evil and bullying each other or looking up, what type of trash, that you can also look at positive resources and learn from it and grow from it. You can go on YouTube and learn how to do all type of healthy things, from meditation on to proper nutrition, to proper exercise, to looking up things about our own legacy. So there's a lot more resources than back in the day that, unless you could make it to the library, you were going to find much of anything. That we do have access to a lot of technology that enables us, as long as we're mindful of looking at what the source is. I mean, even right now, there is so many other different Zoom things that are going on, that people have choices. You want to have a discussion? Do you want to, zoom in on something that talks about yourself? Do you want, there's so many, so that just, when we work with our children, when we work with our families and our parents, that there's so many resources now that we can tap them into, even from our homes. Even with COVID, you still have access through the internet to so much positive. Even the people tuning in today, they didn't have to, worry about leaving their homes and going wherever. You have a whole international from all over the place right here, at the click of a button on the computer.
Right. So I think we're doing this well, sharing information, you guys making yourself available, because we're going to put this out on different social media outlets. Not only is this live, and we had quite a few people come in and ask questions. They were engaged the entire time. They stayed the entire time. That's because this information is needed. So as we wrap up, I want each one of you to tell us, how do we get to you? Because I've interviewed each one of you guys, and literally I'm following each one of you guys, because you guys have so much information. I've written down different things here that I've learned and taken away from each one of you guys. Even though I've studied myself, there's so much more to learn, and I'm hungry for that. So how do you get your information out to our audience on our podcast, our social media outlets, on YouTube, so that we can continue this dialogue and we can educate and again share this information? Nefa KaRaa, how do we get to you?
The best way to reach me, my website is mutsmer.org, M as in Mary, UTS, M as in Mary, ER.org, or my email, which is all lowercase spectrums, SPECTRYM as in Mary, S as in Sam, @yahoo.com.
And we'll most definitely have all of this in the links. What about you, Crystal? How do we get to you?
Well, you can reach me by email, either through UWM, which is cdcarter@uwm.edu, and CDC Carter, CARTER, @att.net.
Dr. Gray?
Okay, it's dracray.com, Dr. Akua, AKUAGRAY.com, and also alifeofpeace.org. And of course, we have all of those social media pages under those names. So the websites, drakuagray.com and alifeofpeace.org.
Can we access you guys with social distancing? Do you have telehealth or online services that you guys offer for your classes? Awesome. Marc, how do we get to you, brother? Marc is all over Chicago, y'all. He doesn't socially distance himself. He is all over. And it's still healthy.
You could go to my website, Ancestral Medicinals. That's ANCESTRALMEDICINALS.com. No, a long word, right?
Yeah.
Ancestral Medicinals. And then they can also email me, Marc, M-A-R-C, at Ancestral Medicinals. And of course, you can follow me on all the social media platforms. I'm on pretty much all the social media platforms.
And of course, Dr. Latham, how do we get to you?
Well, it's been consistent since 1979. Just put in the word SunFired, SUNFIRED, and I'll pop up everywhere. My website, my email address is sunfired@sunfire.com, and also search for my name, Aris, ARIS, Latham, LATHAM. And the best place to reach me, consistently today is every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time on Instagram. Let's talk SunFired. And, you can talk to me directly online at Instagram for free, and let's get it on.
And I'm just typing in here. So you guys type that in if you guys haven't typed it in for our attendees, your information so that they can have it directly. But of course, I'm Dr. Elisha Robinson, ElishaRobinson.com or integrativehealingdoc.com. I want to give a shout out to my boy Nas, and hopefully he get a hold of this because he has sparked something. Because I do believe that this is a pebble in the pool, and we're going to continue to push this because this is something that we need to continue to dialogue on. So thank you guys. Thank you all my panelists. I want to humbly thank you guys, Dr. Gray, Dr. Latham, who are joining us from across the seas. Dr. Latham is in Panama. Dr. Gray is in Ghana. Marc, thank you for coming from Chicago, sitting in your car, pull over to the side of the road because we want to talk. We want to keep you safe, Marc. Thank you, Dr. Carter. She's coming all the way from Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Go Bears. And also Sister Nefa KaRaa, all the way from New York City. Are you in New York, New York?
Yes.
New York, New York, and of course yours truly from Rockford, Illinois. So please, please, please reach out to these wonderful panelists who have taken their time to be with us today. Thank you guys and have a blessed, blessed night.